Good afternoon, everybody playing at home. I'd like to welcome everybody, especially welcome the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Gates. Councillors, we're all here. There's no need for any leave of absence. If I could have somebody confirm the minutes. Moved Councillor Bailden-Lumsden, thank you. Seconded Councillor Patterson. All in favour? Excellent, that's the minutes out of the way. I haven't been notified of any conflicts of interest declarations. I do note that we will be doing the community grants report shortly, so the challenge is only really if councillors have executive positions on any of those groups that might have made an application, and I didn't see any that jumped to mind. Councillors, we have 4 start items. Would anybody like to unstar any of those? No? Councillor Patterson.
I may just ask a question.
Yeah.
As I didn't attend the audit meetings, I was just wondering if there was anything that you would want to share from those meetings.
Not from the 27th of September, and I wasn't at the last audit committee meeting. Was it? So I wasn't for that.
Okay, thank you. No.
Yeah, Councillor Young.
27th of September, there was some discussion around the hotter figures being late again, and we thought they would be dealt with on the day, but unfortunately I didn't think we got there that day or even that week. So there was some discussion around that, and we had the CEO and the chair of their audit committee or their finance committee speak to us about that.
No?
Thank you.
So we still have 4 unstart items. Would anybody like to move the 4 start items? Excellent. Moved Councillor Taylor and seconded Councillor Hamill. All in favour? Carried. Councillors, that leaves us with 6.1, 5, 6 and 7. So let's start with 6.1. Which is the Community Grants Report 21-22, Round 1. So the recommendation is up on the screen. The recommendation's broken, I think, into a couple of subsets. So the first one is we're dealing with the Narang Rugby Union Club and the Tweed Coolangatta AFL Club, which is, my understanding, is the allocation of funding from local area works based on control accounts. Yep. And I'm assuming that in both cases it's supported by the divisional councillors, which is why it's here. And then we have the approval of a multi-year funding agreement for the Easter United event. And then there is the recommendations in regards to the citywide grant recommendations. So I have some views on that, but does any councillors would like to say anything in regards to the agenda item? Councillor Gates.
The only comment that I would make, Mr Chair, is that I would have liked to have seen a wider distribution of the funds and a little greater consideration to the spreading of The amounts requested to a couple of groups that were omitted from receiving any funding at all, that are, issues that are very dear to most of our hearts, like domestic violence and cancer patients and the like. I mean, I don't know how you plan to do this, whether you plan to go through the funding deliberations line by line, or how you would like to manage it. But it's just a general comment that I'm making, that I think, have previously tried to spread the available dollars as widely as we possibly can within our community and community groups, where we recognise that strong support is not only necessary but totally supported by the members of this council. So there were just a few that where very large amounts of money were provided that I felt could have been better utilised by spreading the offering. What we don't have in this report is the background to every application, and nor do we have the criteria upon which each decision was made. So I'm not being critical of the committee that has presented this to us, because I don't know the detail, and the devil may be in the detail as to why the recommendations before us have been made. But my view would be to spread the dollars a little more widely.
Thank you. So, Nikki, are we able to take the officer's recommendation and make amendments as a council in regards to that recommendation?
Yes.
Okay. And do we need to provide anything other than a general reason, being that we were liking to include more groups as we do that? So if we wanted to move some up and some down, we don't need to do an explanation for each line, other than to say it's about trying to potentially provide more grants to more groups.
Correct, that's a matter for the council.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, I have some ideas in regards to some of the groups that I have had some dealing with, and I'm happy to go through the pages line by line. I thought before I did that I would just maybe have a quick chat about the Easter event, which is the Easter United event, where we've previously agreed as a council to seek a multi-year funding agreement, which is the officers have proposed. And in reading the report, I had asked for some advice from Steve Brooks in regards to what the previous funding commitment from the council had been for that event, and I've got some figures, and I've got a view that maybe we should look at trimming the proposed dollar amount and maybe flattening it so that it's an equal amount over the 4 years, but it's also comparable to what the city had funded in previous years. So, and if we were of a mind as a committee to do that, that would leave us with a little bit more funding to potentially be able to allocate through the grant process. So, in 2019, I've been advised that the amount provided was $80,000. 2020 was clearly difficult because it was directly impacted by cancellation from the first round of COVID, but they had committed $20,000, which was expended, and then in this year, I've been advised it was $90,000. So, and between 2019 and 21, it was also relocated from the hotter Voss area to Broadwater. Did anybody go to April 21? I think it was Broadwater, wasn't it, that it was moved to? Ostensibly, part of that was to try to manage some of their costs that they had between the difference between hotter and the Broadwater. So So the officer's recommendation of 100,000, to me, I think that it should sit at no more than what was provided in 2021. So I don't know if there is a general support for that idea. Councillor Pauline Young.
Thanks, and through you, Chair, I agree with you on that side of things, that I would say in 2019 when we had that $80,000 there was possibly where majority of councils would have thought that we were supportive of that at the time, and then when we look on this decreasing scale here to say in 2024, 25, we're looking at 85,000. I think if, as suggested by yourself, if we were to look at a set amount for each year for that 4 years, to be not a declining one, but use that as our maybe our maximum benchmark, either 80 or 85,000 a year, rather than this going up to 100 and coming back down to 95 and then 90. And I think based on those figures there, I think it's about 370,000 over the 4 years. I mean, if we said 80,000 over 4 years, that's 320,000. So, I mean, I don't know what other councillors think, but I actually think if we set a mark that this is going to be, then perhaps we're going to be, the groups that are involved may look at some sort of contribution going forward if they want it to be bigger than what it is, but the city's supporting a base of X amount of dollars.
So my understanding is that it was a free ticketed event, or there may have been a very nominal amount. Was it a small amount or free amount, Nikki? Do you recall?
My understanding is that it was a free event, but you had to register to attend.
Which is part of their COVID management plan, and that makes sense. And I think part of the reason for entering into a multi-year agreement is it provides them some stability in regards to their funding and their partnering. The city doesn't fund it all, and they've also got some funding arrangements in place as well. So, Councillor Young, did you have 80, 85? Councillor McDonald, did you have a view on a per annum dollar amount? Excellent. Councillor Taylor? 85. Councillor Barlin Lumsden? Councillor Patterson? Councillor Gates?
I would be comfortable with either. It really doesn't impact on me. I guess the reason for the sliding scale was to hopefully attract some commercial sponsorship, and for Juice Media to leverage sponsorship for the event. So I think we should be encouraging them to do that. But I'm happy to support whatever the committee feels.
Councillor Hamill?
Go in the middle, 82.5.
Right. So I like the idea of 85 and just flat over the 4 years. And my understanding is that they can make that work. Yeah. So, Councillor Pauline Young?
And just and to speak to what Councillor Gates was saying too, I think it goes either way. If you give
when you've got a foot on either side of the fence, it does.
Yeah, and when you if you have the 8 rather than being sliding scale, if you've set a baseline and they want to have growth in this particular event, then they're actually going to have to get that commercial sponsorship. If we say this is what the city's prepared to do, if you want a growth or you want a more diverse event or you want to encourage other groups to participate, then they will have to look at getting some sort of additional commercial support.
Okay. So, councillors, if we were to say 85 over 4 years, that then frees up another $15,000 as part of conversation in regards to this grant round. Is that correct? Nick?
I've just provided Grant with some total figures around what you currently, without changing any of the proposed recommendations as they are, which of course you likely will, but there's also some available funding still left, including East United, which is circa, I think, 109 or 104, depending on where you land with the 80, 85.
Okay. And that's good. Yeah, no, that's good. I was actually also going to ask you, which I didn't prior to the meeting, but I'm not too sure where we left off with the 2 surf life-saving branches, because I know that there was last round, I think that we had split some funds to them.
Yes, so we have that funding available, but we have not yet received the advice from the city solicitor, so we are ready to pay but have not yet been able to pay those funds.
Rightio. Okay, so even if there are funds that are haven't been spent and are reserved, there's still that
Correct.
opportunity.
We've quarantined those funds.
Okay.
And just through the chair, sorry, what did you say that it gives an extra 30,000?
I said 15, and then
Just for the 1 year, but 30 over the 4 years.
so I was only
Aiming
thinking
at 1
about
year.
21, 22.
Yep. Correct. Sorry. Thank you.
That's what I would be talking about. So, councillors, if we could maybe go to page 26. And I had done an allocation in my mind, which had the allocation recommended by the officers and what I would like to suggest as maybe being a starting point for some revisions. And what I had thought of is there were several groups where I tried to give them a similar type of dollar amount, be it $1,500 or something like that. So there was a bit of consistency across those groups. And then there were a couple of groups which, for a variety of reasons, the officers maybe hadn't looked at, and I think that we should. And then there were a couple of groups where I think that the officers had made a recommendation which, in my mind, would be maybe better left with local area works and concerts and events type funding. And that, I suppose, is just a bit of a balance. So I might give you a bit of an idea of some of the groups that I thought we should be lending some support to, and if there's kind of support for that general direction, then if we were going to support them, we would need to be making adjustments elsewhere. Councillor Gates?
Maybe after you've done that, you might like to share what you've got and let us have a quick look at it and see if we can support it and get it nailed today.
So some of the groups that I thought that we should give some consideration to funding was Hear and Say, which is the Gold Coast Hear and Say Centre, which is Centre for Deaf Children. The Cancer Patients, Cancer Patients Foundation, which is Look Good, Feel Better. The Veterans Care Association, which is a health and wellbeing rehabilitation program. Baby Gives, so page 28, Veteran Care Association. Baby Give Back, We Support Project. Baby Give Back provide recycled baby equipment to families in need. The Gold Coast Australia Day Foundation, the Hearts of Purple, the Pregnancy and Family Support, and the Titans Community Fund, their Titans Cultural Evening. And I had allocated in my mind some dollars, but that requires some reallocation from the officer's recommendation. So, Councillor Patterson.
I'd just like to say that I don't think we should be allocating money based on that the name sounds nice.
Yeah.
And we really need to look at the governance of this, which is what I understand the council officers have done. So, for example, I've personally given money in divisional funds to Cancer Support Sisters who do exceptional work for very few dollars in the area of Look Good, Feel Better effectively on cancer. Now, there's a reason why council officers have determined that in this regard they see that there's a cost-benefit concern there. If there was $9,000 given to the Cancer Support Sisters, that it's incredible to think what could potentially happen given what they do on $100 or $200. So yes, it sounds lovely, but I don't want. It's not actually fair to the organisations who have done good governance for us to just go, okay, no, we're just going to give it carte blanche to everyone because their name sounds nice too. I'm sure there's a lot of work that's gone into this rather than us just going, oh, look, we like the sound of them, let's give them the same amount of money.
And that's not unreasonable. There are also some elements of the proposed funding which I think should be local area works. And also groups that I know don't potentially have a broad group number, but have been provided with quite a substantial recommendation for funding. And in previous years, councillors have been able to have a direct involvement in regards to some of that process. We currently can only do that now in this room, so we can't do it as part of the officer recommendation. We can do it as part of the amendments to the recommendation. Yep, so Councillor Patterson.
Well, I would say if we're going to do that, we're either in it and we do it properly or we don't. But for us to say that we're going to do it in this room and we make a decision based on a one-liner in a spreadsheet, that's not what was done before when there was. So I don't think that's really proper.
So in previous year, so in 2012-13, we quite literally spent 3 days doing it, and there has to be a balance somewhere in between that and coming up with an allocation of funding.
Right, which is why there has been allocation of time and resources to go through the governance of that, right, which we just cannot do in this room with this information, right?
So the allocation of time and resources is because of a function of change to state legislation, which prevented councillors being part of that assessment panel, but we are able to be part of a decision-making panel. Councillor Gates.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to make a comment given your mention of local area works. The Seahawks play out of the Coomera facility, and I totally agree with you and would be more than happy to stump up some divisional funds to assist with their grandstands. They also play somewhere else. I'm not quite sure whose division it might impact, but there's no doubt in my mind that that is something that could be funded divisionally rather from this program, given we've got a limited amount of funds to spread amongst the volunteers and community groups that are the most needy. And I think we should focus on what that is and other avenues that other groups have to apply for funding. So it's only through this process or our divisional grants that we have an opportunity to assist community groups, whereas we can do a lot through our local area works for sporting clubs, etc. And I think that's where it's best placed.
Yeah. So, Councillor Hamill, I see you, but I'm going to go to Grant first.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just in order to respond, I think, to some of the questions being raised, I had a quick chat with Nikki. I think it is worth Nikki providing even just a very short summary of perhaps particularly some of the applications that you have specifically mentioned. So if that would be useful.
Through the Chair, I can just speak really briefly to some of those projects so you have a bit of an understanding about why they perhaps didn't score as well by the moderation panel, and then the committee can make a decision. The Hear and Say Centre had a very unclear operating budget when they demonstrated what they weren't really able to clearly articulate to council or to council officers what the project was for with the funding they were asking. On that basis, it didn't score very well because we weren't able to then articulate what we were getting for the grant funds. The Gold Coast Titans application that...
Nikki, can I just ask a question there? When you say didn't score very well and they're the 6th on the list or the 7th on the list...
Sorry.
So that makes me think that we don't have the information because there's people there that scored 88, the highest on the list, and got nothing. So
no, sorry, through the Chair. Sorry, that's my incorrect. But what I should have said was in the moderation discussion, it did score well. I can see that there, it scored 74. my apologies. With the Gold Coast Titans community event, it was felt that that was really a value for money question. That was a dinner with food and drinks to be provided, so council would essentially be funding a dinner for Titans and their attendees. The cancer patients Look Good, Feel Better program, the bulk of that budget was actually funding shipping costs from interstate to get the packages from interstate up into Queensland, so there was no local purchase benefit in the city. So it was felt that there was not actually that local benefit. The vast majority of that budget was postage.
Councillor Gates.
Issue. This is an issue where we want to help the needy in our city. So maybe the packages aren't available here, and sometimes it's about helping those that need our support, not determining whether there's a commercial benefit to the city in this instance, I believe. So I think we kind of need to keep that in mind as well. Just a comment. Sorry, Nikki.
No, that's okay. Baby Give Back. So that one, when we looked into the application, the actual project itself did not actually even articulate that the project was about purchasing baby seats. But when I engaged with the applicant, she couldn't explain to me why there was this difference between what was in the budget, which was primarily about purchasing seats, and what she was applying for. So it was a concerning application when she didn't really understand what she was applying for. And probably the only other one that Hearts of Purple is probably really speaks to that individual benefit. It's actually for the purchase of a limited number, I believe it's 10 emergency watches for DV, women at risk of DV, and they also have an ongoing monitoring cost. So that's what that project was about. So it was about a really small cohort of women being provided with a really high value item that required an ongoing financing component, that if the organisation couldn't fund that, the benefit actually ended in a short period of time. And then pregnancy and family support, that was the purchase of gift vouchers, which again, I know council doesn't support. So there were just some detail in those applications you might be interested in.
So, Councillor McDonald.
Mr. Chair, I think I gave some divisional funding to Hearts of Purple. I have to check. We might be able to check that. Yes.
Councillor Patterson.
Through you, Mr. Chair, could you just comment on the Vets Care one and the Australia Day one?
I actually wasn't in the moderation for those two, so I can't speak specifically, but I can talk more generally. Katie's just letting me know now. There was just some general concerns around the budget wasn't very clear, so around what the funding was actually going to be spent on. And Veterans Care, I think it may have been concerns around the number of people benefiting from that grant. So it was about spreading the benefit again, but I can come back to you with more project details. And they've got a multi-year funding agreement as well.
So I have
Veterans Care.
Councillor Pauline Young and then Councillor Gates. Sorry?
And Australia Day. Yep. Through the chair, and the Australia Day, the budget wasn't clear, so it wasn't clear what they were seeking the funding for.
Councillor Pauline Young.
Thank you. And Nikki, I'd like to know about humpbacks and high rises, because it's right along our whole whichever it is, 54, 56, 57 kilometres of beachfront, and having experienced conversations with a lot of those people in high rises who make a voluntary contribution to our whales getting caught in nets and things like that, I was quite surprised that they scored the highest in our percentage score at 88 and got given 0.
Through the chair, the reason for that was the actual date of the event. We couldn't pay them before the event was to be held, and we can't reimburse them for funding. But what we could do potentially, or what the committee could consider doing, is providing them with a grant today for their next event in 2022. And when we issue them with grant funding, we can just provide them with funding conditions around acquittal that gives them that flexibility to acquit in a further amount of time.
And I would be supportive of that in the fact that, you know, we market ourselves worldwide as a beach city and our tourism and all that sort of stuff. And I think it's actually quite essential to support a program of volunteers who are supporting the safety of people who visit our city as well as residents within the city. So I'd be very supportive of that $1,500 being, is it on Councillor Owen Jones's list there, that $1,500 being considered today, because, you know, a lot of those volunteers are very, very on the ball when you speak to SeaWorld and places like that too, where they deliver the information.
So, Nikki, there were a couple where I felt might have been better as local area works and funding. So, for example, the Mudgeeraba lines, well, there were 2 lines applications. One was unsuccessful and one was successful. It's through the matrix. But so the Helensvale Lions Club do an Australia Day citizenship ceremony, which we effectively assist with funding through our local area works budget. So to me, we need to have one eye on that because we've got a limited amount of whole of city grant funding, but we've got a lot more flexibility in regards to how we can do some of those concert and events type of funding. Councillor Gates.
Thanks, Chair. I have 2 comments to make too. One, I think, in regard to the applications and through you to the people that were on the panel, we have some groups who are familiar with applications and who submit many. But I think we really need to bear in mind that many of these groups are made up of volunteers who don't perhaps have the expertise in completing the applications to the level where perhaps there is clarity, and maybe even the application is spread for example, in regard to Baby Gives Back, maybe one of the others actually prepared the application without consulting sufficiently with other members of the group. And I just think they are volunteer groups in many instances, and we must bear that in mind in then making the decisions about who gets what. The other one that I meant to mention earlier, but just looking on this list I see, is Club Pickleball. And Club Pickleball is a separate entity from another pickleball club. I think they splintered off. And I think, if I'm correct, Club Pickleball doesn't actually have a designated home yet. I know that the pickleballers approached me about the possibility of using Viney Park, and Viney Park is currently undergoing a $5 million master planning exercise, and we have arranged for them to have temporary use of some courts there that have been remarked for their use, but they wanted to put up a boulder wall for a hit-up wall, which was declined because we don't want to be spending money on those courts that are going to be demolished in the foreseeable future. So there's a 3-year funding plan for Viney Park. And so I don't know, because we haven't got that level of information, I don't know what Club Pickleball applied for. I gave them a small amount of money through the divisional donation so they could promote their membership, because they only have a small membership in Northern Gold Coast. But I would be reluctant to give a huge amount of money to them when they have courts now to use in a temporary capacity, but there is no way that they can make any capital improvements to those courts at this point in time because of the master planning. So I don't know what they wanted the money for, and it would be helpful if...
Of course. So I'm just pulling out the application now so we can get it, but the summary of the application was the purchasing of equipment necessary to help us grow our club so more adults and children can play pickleball, to allow us to have session conveners rather than relying on the 2 people we borrow equipment from to run 5 sessions a week. And the project budget is the purchase of 8 pickle net nets, 480 rolls of masking tape, 100 beginner balls, 100 tournament quality balls and 20 beginner paddles, totalling $4,605. So it's pick up and move equipment, potentially not capital items.
Okay, thank you.
and again, so very passionate group, which have been newly formed in the last couple of years. And I think they've probably been around to speak to most of the Northern Gold Coast councillors. I know that they're playing at least one day a week out of Helens Vale's Discovery Park Tennis Club. My understanding, because we had encouraged them probably over the last 18 months to incorporate, because prior to that it was very much a family affair. So I think they've only recently incorporated, and I think they have about 100 members. To me, that is the balance that we have a chance to strike today. So I know that they made an application to Councillor Gates in Division 3 and Councillor in Division 2 as well. I think Councillor Gates took that one up because of where they're playing from, and as part of that divisional donation round, we ended up with the paddleball, the paddlers, you know. So, yeah.
So I made a bigger donation to them than I had planned to, because they were playing in Division 3, not Division 2.
Yeah, and Nikki, I suppose that's one of the advantages. That, we kind of see and hear some stuff that maybe you don't, or the evaluation committee doesn't have that opportunity to see. So, and likewise, I think that there was the Gold Coast mountain bike. I was interested in knowing whether or not that was on state land or council land.
Yes, Chair, we actually spent a lot of time on that application. So initially I had some concerns, obviously, about their lack of tenure and the notion that should they be asked to vacate their present premises at the Nerang State Forest, Council will have invested in capital items that then are obviously worthless, and also through the lens of Council undertaking or funding works on what is essentially state land. So I engaged with the mountain biking club and told them, and based on, moderation. So at the moderation, it was thought that mountain biking as a sport is well supported. It's a growth sport, and it's something that, shows great potential in the city. But obviously this tenure issue is a risk, and they don't have a home per se. Off the back of that, I engaged with them, asked if they had progressed their tenure arrangements with the state or their negotiations with the state, and advised them that should council approve anything, it would likely be conditional on the funds not being paid until tenure had been formalised. And off the back of that, they have provided us with a signed collaboration agreement from the state government, providing them with an ability to use the mountain biking trails, and on the basis of that, it was included as a recommendation to the committee. Had we not received that, it would not have been recommended for funding for the committee's consideration. And I have those agreements here if you'd like to see them.
And the Runaway Bay Sports and Leadership, again, I'm always confused as to whether or not the Runaway Bay Centre is ours or the state's, or where we're at this week.
Is this the school? Is it? Oh, sorry, which one? Councillor?
I think it was called Runaway Bay Sports and Leadership.
What number is it? Sorry, I'll just get it up. Oh, yes. So this, we've investigated these as well on the basis of whether or not they meet our criteria of being a community organisation, and they fall in exactly the same sphere as the Tallabudgera Rec Centre and the surf school there.
Yep.
So they are considered an educational institution under the state statutory act that also acknowledges schools being a community organisation, and it's on that basis that we felt that they did meet that threshold of being a community organisation. That said, there are shades of grey, so when we get request collateral from them, so say a purchase order, to have a look at some of their documentation, a lot of that is badged under the state government banner. So whilst there's certainly some element of state funding and state funding support, I think they can be viewed safely in the same way that we view schools, but they are really boosted out of that divisional lens because they're not servicing just a division, they actually service a much broader community, like the Tallabudgera Rec Centre.
Chairman, didn't we remove schools? Didn't we remove schools from being...
Yeah, but these aren't schools.
I understand that, but if they're considered in the same light as a school, I thought we removed schools. Last year, didn't we?
Certainly schools have been removed on the basis that they have a divisional focus. These aren't considered schools in the traditional sense, and as I said, they're certainly a shade of grey. They're a bit of a misfit, but if we're looking at what they do and where they benefit, it's a line ball. It's one of those line ball calls.
And if I can ask about the Gold Coast Amateur Beekeepers Association enclosure.
The comments from the officer on that application was that whilst it was a great application and certainly a worthy project, the direction of funding in terms of council is that there's a preference to fund native bees and native bee enclosures, and that coupled with that, the city itself runs a number of beekeeping and native bee workshops and seminars, and so there was a value consideration there in terms of whether or not that same community service could be gained or the city was already delivering a like service.
So what exactly was the proposal and where was it proposed to be constructed?
It was a movable enclosure to be able to do workshops on the go. So it had, my understanding was it had sort of a perspex type arrangement and it was movable. And the vast majority of the cost was around the design and fabrication of it, and then the other $5,000 of the budget was about a beekeeping training certificate. But it was about the manufacturing of this item to be able to move it around to run the workshops was the project.
Councillor Patterson.
Through you, Mr Chair, I'm a little confused on that one because from what you've presented then, it sounds like there's a lot of reasons why not to allocate the money, but you've allocated $10,000.
I wasn't
well,
on
not
the
you, but
yeah.
you know, you're effectively saying that it's not where we want to allocate our money. We want to focus it on native bees, but we've given it $10,000.
That was the view of the moderation panel and the agreement that they came to in terms of the funding. But that was the comments from the officer about why full funding shouldn't be provided.
Sweet. Councillor Hamill.
Mr Chair, only one very quick comment, and it's just around the Seahawks, because they did let me know about that project some time ago and they applied for that grant money, and as much as I appreciate they're in Councillor Gates' area, it is a North Gold Coast organisation, so just to put it out there that if there's a discussion about maybe one or more divisions putting into that one to cover that 20,000, I'd be happy to put in some money from Division 1 towards it, and maybe the good chairperson being the other division in that area might.
And the good news is that their president lives in Pacific Pines, so that's another northern council.
Oh, then we'll spread it across 4. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
But I suppose my understanding is that it'll be grandstands for either the Beatty Road Centre or Runaway Bay. You know, so and it's clearly not designed to be movable because they have a right of use at both of those facilities. So
we'll commit Councillor Caldwell to $5,000 as well and just call it a day, and all four in done.
So you, Councillor Peter Young, Councillor Gates and Councillor Caldwell all in for $5,000. It sounds like fair. Councillor Pauline Young and then Councillor McDonald.
Thank you very much, Chair. And just back to Baby Give Back again, and I'm a bit the same with Councillor Gates on this one. They're not always going to be the best at everything, but they're doing a magnificently wonderful voluntary job. And for the project for the baby seats, that's been something that's been on most of our radio stations, and that as they're trying to, they've got a drive going to actually get baby seats. They've got volunteers doing absolutely everything else, but to get those reliable baby seats in there. So it's, whilst they may not have completed the paperwork as in the way that perhaps it's been changed to in the last iteration of changes, they do have a very, very proactive, healthy history within the city, probably for at least the last 5 years. I've been visiting their establishment once a year, as I know a lot of the other councillors have had, where they've watched the growth in it and how very proactive they are with managing all their volunteers, and they've got a ream of volunteers and a ream of people collecting for them within the community and that. And when it comes down to funding, we know that second-hand car seats aren't something that are generally supported going into, and these are people who can't afford that type of thing. So I think for me, and I could be harping on it, I could be talking, and people aren't that convinced by it, but the one thing that they need to be, I guess, secure with is that we've got the whole communities working with these volunteers to ensure that they're providing clean clothing and bundles and mothers packs and siblings packs and things like that. But you cannot, I can't emphasise enough how, to have a safe car seat in these places, and they may not have met the criteria, but we do know in our media circles that it is actually something that they're really striving for and working towards.
So our office is a collection point for them in the north, and they probably come and pick up a carload of donated items every fortnight. So, and we've always found them pretty easy to work with, and I describe it as like the Robin Hood of baby essentials. Like, I mean, people who no longer need them give them up, and people that need them take advantage to it. So I actually think it is very much what community's about. So I think I had Councillor McDonald next and then Councillor Gates.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Page 27, the Indigenous Music and Cultural Program.
Yep.
Sorry, through the chair, just like a bit more information on the application. Sorry. So the application itself was really divisionally focused. It was really about delivering programs into southern schools. So on that basis, it wasn't well supported by the panel.
Okay, thanks.
And sorry, can I just say that I've previously applied in the north, and we had provided them with a very small seed grant when they applied, and I don't think we heard back from them. Then I'm not to say that they don't do wonderful things, but I think they moved on. Councillor Gates.
I think they operate out of a home in Division 3 at Upper Coomera, and there have been some conversations over time between family members associated with it. So anyway, I just had a query, Chairman, about the Giddy Up application, and what is the condition that's been placed upon that? There was a condition, I think, HHH, what's that?
Page 29, halfway down. The Horses Helping Humans licence.
Because I don't know about anyone else, but that's a fantastic program for people with a disability, and it's one that I'd love to tick and support, and I don't know why you felt the need, or the panel felt the need, for it to be conditional. And
so I'm going to defend Nikki and say that it wasn't her personally.
No, the panel. I changed the panel. I said the panel.
It was more Jazane.
So through the chair, so the actual project itself is just the payment of a licence fee. And I did look into this application in a bit more detail to really try and unpick exactly what the governance arrangements are around this organisation. Essentially, it's a registered charity. The charity runs from the person who operates the charity's home, and they contract that arrangement from her, the charity leases from the individual who runs the business, and then the operator of Triple H that owns the Horses Healing Humans licensing arrangement essentially sort of contracts her services down to the charity as well. So whilst there's no question that the actual programs themselves are great, and I had a look on the website and everything myself, that there's probably a few structural concerns in terms of how it operates, where and how.
Geographically, whereabouts are they located?
It's in, I feel like Gilston or Maudslin.
There's a couple of different variations of that. So we've got the Riding for the Disabled, there's the Healing Hooves.
Benogan, sorry, it's Benogan. And a riding school also runs from this same property.
Like, I mean, anybody that, again, it's hard.
It is.
Because, like, I mean, I think if you've had that opportunity to see what some of these groups do, like, I mean, it really does change people's lives. So, Councillor Patterson, did I miss you, or did you have your hand up? Yep.
I just thought I'd just give some comment on these things in terms of forwarding discussion. So I support Councillor Young on the humpback and high rises. I get that, and that makes sense. And also on the baby gives back, I appreciate the input here today. But I would, if we do give them support, I would like to request that we give them a very clear feedback that we have done this even though potentially they haven't met that criteria on paper, because it isn't really fair to other groups. We need to be able to do it based on what is on paper given to us. So I would want that worded to them based on our experience of you, we're doing this, but it won't happen again unless we get that detail. And it goes to that element too of what was just referred to in terms of the contracting, and there's many charities with great intentions, but it may be that 70% of dollar contributions go to a salary, and we don't know whether that's the case or not. So we just need to be really clear on those things. And then the final thing is I don't have enough information still on Vets Care to make a decision on that one.
Sorry, through the chair. Councillor Patterson, so you're referring to the PTSD Resurrected Inc. Gold Coast Veterans Reboot filming project? Just so we're talking about the same one? Veterans Coast, that one? All veterans.
Top of page 27 is the one
Or
Nikki's talking
28.
about.
28. Veteran Care Association, Health and Wellbeing Rehab.
Second one down on 28 is what Councillor Patterson's talking about.
Sorry, I'm just looking at the other spreadsheet.
Oh, there's one on 27.
That got no funding.
Veterans Care, okay. It's 42, application 42. So it is, sorry for the delay, Chair, the delivery of a 9-day residential health and wellbeing rehabilitation program for 25 wounded, ill and injured war veterans from St George's Resort, Rainbow Bay. The comments we've got here was essentially that the grant's being used to pay for accommodation for the veterans. So there was just that concern that it's actually about taking them away somewhere and
Rehabilitating them.
The good news is we're no longer in Afghanistan. The bad news is that it's the longest war the Australian government's ever been involved in, and it's left people broken, you know. So, Councillor Patterson.
Could you tell me a little bit more about the association? Is that possible?
So they're focused on providing early intervention for veterans on the Gold Coast with complex health issues who might otherwise end up homeless or with suicidal or criminal activity and requiring disproportionate community resources. And they've said that this is a continuation of early programs that council supported for the large veteran community of the Gold Coast. They've got strong participant feedback on the programs.
Councillor Patterson.
So I appreciate it's probably not a normal way of doing things to allocate money for people to go have a holiday. But if this is an association who've identified that this is the best way that they can contribute to veterans who are dealing with those circumstances that you said, then, well, they're the ones who decide it, right?
So
We either kind of value them as an association determining what's best for these, for the people they're taking
and it's
care
the
of.
St George's House, isn't it? Yeah, so St George's House is down at Rainbow Bay and has been there since post-World War II, as in the property. I think that they recently renovated it. Councillor McDonald, do you know? It's just near the surf club, but I think that they either renovated it or redeveloped it in recent years. But it's been a program that's been established for 60 odd years.
I'm sure it's not intended as a holiday per se, but to rehabilitate people who have been through untold troubles. I mean, gee, can't we just support them?
So, and then councillors, I know that Crime Stoppers is, I think, one that we talk about every year, Nikki. So, and there's a south and there's a north, and I think that the northern one is currently in hiatus, to the best of my knowledge. So that to me was why I suppose I took the recommendation and halved it so that the southern end, if it isn't in hiatus, gets some benefit. But it just seems, Councillor Gates.
I had notification last year after we provided funding that it had gone back to head office to manage because the northern branch was no longer being chaired by, I think it was Roberta who was involved, and she'd stood aside, and I've never had notification of another group being established, and I've not been aware of any meetings that have been held in the last year. That's not to say they may not have happened and I might not have been informed, but I did have a strong association with them and I've had no contact since. Do you?
So I haven't. I think I last attended a meeting at the at Coomera Library probably 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So, councillors, what would does anybody have a view? Councillor Patterson.
I would propose that we support babies, veterans and whales.
In that order?
100% to what they requested, but the other ones I don't see has met the criteria that we need.
Okay. Councillor McDonald?
Yeah, I tend to agree.
Councillor Young?
And thank you. And I want to go back to the comment that you made, Chair, re some of our different groups, our different cultural groups. So we look at some of them have been allocated 2,500 and then others allocated 1,500, like the Australian Brazilian one, I think, 2,500, it should be 1,500 as in, we've got, I think it's either it could be the Chinese,
Hungarians.
the Hungarians and all. They're all differing amounts, and I think, I just look at if we're going to be fair and reasonable, that every group should get reasonably the same amount of money, which is, I think, is what the chair suggested before, as in $1,500. So I think if we went back through a couple of these groups, was the Brazilians got 1,500, and rather than the 2.5, and the Hungarians and the one that I can't pronounce, the YUEX. It's right down. It's about
Exes.
Yes, for 8th from the bottom. I would be very supportive of, and not saying that they should all be on the same thing, but if we're going to support our different multicultural groups, it would seem fair that they were across the board.
And
Did you say that? Yeah, consistency, yeah.
Councillor Gates.
Chairman, I just want to say that I'm noticing on the list that you've provided us that you've actually redistributed some of the funds where the entire amount, for example, the Southport Yacht Club.
Yep.
And it was recommended that they receive the entire amount that they applied for. And it looks to me as if you've suggested a slight reduction so that the money could be more widely spread amongst others who have perhaps not done so well. So I'm just wondering if all of the committee members have had a look at what you have suggested here, comparing it with the table of recommendations, and apart from Councillor Patterson and Councillor McDonald supporting those particular groups, whether there's an appetite to actually redistribute some of the funds in the way that's been suggested to more evenly spread the available dollars.
And I'll just speak to the Southport Yacht Club, because I'm actually a big fan of them. They educate like an enormous amount of kids through their programs.
And they've got the sports,
and
the water sports.
They're at Oxenford, but I know that we contributed, I think from memory, $2,000 through the divisional donation program to equip. It actually was to safety equipment, but the city has also recently supported them through a couple of $1 million in regards to the super yacht facility as well. So I don't think they're necessarily going to mind not getting their full allocation, because I think that their cupboard is a bit full already.
Thank you. And is it the view of the members that where local area works has been identified, and I'm happy to take back any requirement for the pickleballers as a local area works contribution if it's necessary at any time. I know that I spoke with them just last week and they were extremely grateful for the donation they'd already received, which the officers would not have known about. But I'm more than happy to deal directly with them as a local area representative. And you've mentioned Mudgeeraba Lions, Southport Sharks, the Seahawks, the Budgerigars.
The first 5 pillars is also another one of those. So that's
so are we happy? I'm happy to remove all of those and redistribute some of the funds and send them back to the divisional officers. And I mean, there's 3 here that are going to come back into my patch. So I'm not picking on anyone. I'm actually taking it back from my budget so that we can be spreading the available funds more widely.
And even the beekeepers, like, I mean, so we've been involved with native bees through the schools and sponsoring a hive. Like, I mean, you can buy a new native bee hive for $700, you know. So, and I know that the city's briefly, where's Alison? She's probably still got PTSD about the city's involvement in beekeeping, but it just seems to be like a big dollar amount for the beekeepers. And I know that there's no harm in groups making application, but I just think we need to balance it. Councillor Taylor?
I just wanted to support the yacht club, yes, in my division, but I think the idea of granting, yes, we haven't had the ability to view the actual applications, but I really support the fact that a lot of these smaller groups do struggle with how to put an application in, and the bigger professional organisations have got the ability to do it. So I think this whole process has been really positive in the race, and to the officers giving their views, but for us to actually give input back into it. And I think it's very important that we, as the community leaders, do identify things that the officers don't do, and we can make those contributions. And look, I'm comfortable with what I can see with the distributions around, and yeah, it's just important that we understand who are the big organisations and who the small ones that are doing good work for the community.
Okay.
I have heard Dazim supporting this list, am I correct?
Councillors, if we start at the top, does anybody, so the humpback and high rises, as I had suggested a revised amount of $1,500. Does anybody disagree or would like more? Councillor Patterson?
I think given the feedback that we can allocate it, and actually probably the timing, we couldn't allocate it next year to the same thing, right? So we should give them the full amount now because they were given a high rating. It was just the
2,000? Anybody disagree with 2,000?
Let's go.
So what I'm imagining, Grant, is that I might write a dollar amount here and I will leave it in your capable hands between now and council to tidy up. I'm going to go down my list. The names may not be quite the same as the organisation name, but I'm going to give it a crack. One Arts, nobody unhappy. Crime Stoppers, $850, but to me that's about the north and the south. Beauties, $1,500. Gold Coast Seniors, $2,500. Who's Against Seniors? Gold Coast Cycle 3046, Mudgeeraba Lions out to concerts and events. So Gold Coast Hospital 3890, Southport Sharks, which is a swimming something. Hear and Say. Councillor Patterson.
Sorry, if I just may note on Southport Sharks without being too cheeky, they do support a lot of people across a lot of the city, and just for the record, Division 6 has more sports clubs in it than any other division that money needs to be allocated to.
Does anybody want to support Councillor Patterson being cheeky? Councillor Hamill is supporting Councillor Patterson, and so too am I. 1482, Hear and Say. St John's, which is, I think, Councillor Taylor's area.
Sorry, what happened with Hear and Say?
I'm pausing at the moment. So at the moment I have 10,000 on my column and I haven't committed 10,000, but I'm going to come back at the end if that's okay. So now I'm at St John's. Yep. Gold Coast Choir, the Australian Brazil Association, 1,500. Gold Coast Basketball, which is half the funding. They asked for PECs from memory. Gold Coast PTSD, 5256. Uniting Church, which is Wesley, 5942. Southport Yacht Club, 10,000. Gold Coast Homeless, 7,000. Gold Coast Photographic, 1,500. Pickleball, are you taking it all? Are we?
$105.
Yeah. Okay. Seed the Ground, which... Councillor Patterson, you're right. Seed the Ground. An amount to the Titans Community Benefit Fund. Yep. Okay. Oz Harvest, 10,000. Christian Community Church. That sounds like it's in Burleigh. Did you want it, Councillor McDonald? Do you want it as
And
law?
it's for
System to check children into their childcare minding.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, just ask a question. If we cut back some of these funds, are they able to do their programs, or is it just in each case, or?
Nick.
So we actually do ask them if we provide them with partial funding if they can still deliver the program, and it's identified in here if they say that they can't. So you can take it as read. There's also like a lot, like I think I gave Grant, there's quite a bit of budget actually left. So
I get that. Yep. Yep. So Councillor McDonald, I take that as my cheeky offer for you to fund it was refused. Is that correct? New Beginnings. Gold Coast Youth Marine Conservation Project. I had said 10,000. Marine Rescue. 4954. Nobody's arguing about marine rescue. Sorry, where do you want to go, Councillor McDonald?
I really do think that we should be putting something into the Indigenous cultural music, because I think they do the whole of the city, not just, you know, certain sections. And I have been...
So I'm going to put a little asterisk beside that, Councillor McDonald, and
the other thing, the Crime Stoppers one.
yep.
With the 850, if that was the application from the Southern Gold Coast,
So it was
and-
described as Southern Tweed North Volunteer Area Committees.
yeah, but I think what they do, they go right up, you know, because the what it used to be Southern, Central,
Yep.
and I think Central fell away, and I think the Southern has moved up to the Central. They do a lot of work, and I think by, you know, reducing it to 850, that would put a lot of pressure.
I don't think it's going to put any pressure on the Northern group because it's not working.
Yeah, but this is,
But I think what Councillor McDonald's saying
the
is that
amount was 1695
yeah,
for the
Southern's picking
Southern.
up the Northern work.
How about 1,500?
Done.
Yeah, the full amount.
Councillor, is anybody going to disagree with the full amount?
No.
Excellent.
There you go.
There will not be pizza for committee this afternoon. No, you're right. Submarine Rescue 4954, and I'm just pausing. We're all back. Councillor McDonald, you're right if I just remove that little asterisk that I'd put as placemaker. Yep. Councillors, the cancer patients, 7.5. Yep. Gold Coast mountain bike. Sorry?
That's on state land.
If we were to contribute $10,000, are they able to do the project?
I think they'd be thankful for the $10,000, obviously. I can come back to you with some reworkings of what they could do with that funding. If
And
that
the
assists.
divisional councillor might help.
Narang, 5. Councillors, I've allocated 10,000. Councillor Hamill, would you like to contribute? Yeah. Okay. Vet care. North Gold Coast Seahawks, which is 4 divisions each contributing 5,000 each. 1, 2, 5. Which part of 1, 2, 5 don't you understand? They'll be getting 30 shortly. Surface, is it Surface Paradise Budger? Is that Budgergars?
I'd just like to know something about the budgerigars. $1,500 for budgerigars, and we'd given zero to veterans at one stage. So I'd just really like to know what we're doing with $1,500 for budgerigars.
You didn't see budgerigars coming today, did you?
Sorry.
Nikki, defend the budgerigars.
Yeah.
Well,
Why didn't they come to you?
Earlier today, one of the panel members told me that he was the most excited about the budgerigars of them all.
I am in fulsome agreement with that statement, councillor.
So nothing to cancer patients, but $1,500 to budgerigars.
No, it was refreshing perhaps to see that an application from a group like this. This is the only budgerigar society in the city, and it's the only type of application we've received of this type. And I can pull the application out, and unfortunately for them, they used to be called the Gold Coast Budgerigar Society, and in the interests of promoting themselves potentially nationally, they changed their name, unfortunately, which may not work in their benefit in this forum. They're the Surfers Paradise Budgerigar Society.
I think it's the budgerigar part of their name. It's actually not the geographic part of their name.
Right?
They show budgerigars.
So Nikki, I can confirm that they're not part of the Northern Gold Coast Pigeon Racing Club, okay? Which now are based out of the Helensvale Scout Hall. All 4 members. It's soon to be located at Stewart's Road. Okay, so I love the fact that they've made an application, and I love the fact that they're going to get $500. Sorry, smuggler? No, I said I'm moving them to Stewart's Road. Wow. Wow. It seemed like such a good idea at the time, didn't it? Runaway based sports leaders, 10,000.
Can I just go back?
Yes.
With the first $5,
Yes.
why did you move that?
Because it is going to be some type of community event on the beach as part of an overall program, and to me that's not a community grant funding recommendation. It's a Comhouse, Love City, $1,500 for the Hungarian seniors, $5,000 for the multicultural arts.
So,
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, Chair. The Hungarians cannot deliver with partial funding.
So it's a no. Okay, don't mess with the Hungarians. Baby Gives Back, 7,500. Australia Day Foundation, 3,000. I know that you said you didn't know what it was going to be used for. My guess is that it's going to be used for an Australia Day celebration.
The application out. Can you pull the application out? Do you want the mountain biking quote?
No. Who's that? Yes. Gold Coast Theatre, 4,500. The Beekeepers. Has anybody got an opinion on the Ryan, what's your view? Sorry, buddy. I've moved on. I can't hear you. Put your microphone on.
You put it down as local area works. How local area works focused did Nikki suggest it was?
It didn't, so so that was wrong.
Okay.
They're European bees. Everybody loves honey, but whether or not you like $10,000 worth of honey, I don't know. Councillor McDonald.
Mr. Chair, just going back to the Gold Coast Australia Day Foundation.
Yeah,
Is that the same group that's always run it?
I hope so. Yes.
It is. Did we give them? I thought that we cut out funding previously.
Through the chair to Councillor McDonald, they didn't get funded last year either.
Yes.
I have the project description here if that assists.
Great.
Apart from its own commemorative national heritage promotion in its many guises and preservation endeavours, the Foundation fosters the activities of two subordinate groups, namely Heritage Voice and the Albert Battery. The combined efforts of all three have for many years supported a wide range of both state and community formal activities that in some cases include recognition by awards from the National Trust. The grant would underwrite the administrative expenses, insurance and limited projects of the Gold Coast Australia Day Foundation and support the operation of Heritage Voice and Albert Battery for the coming year.
Does anybody not like Australia?
I just wanted to make sure that those went.
I was just going to suggest Nikki might want to check whether they are a no to partial funding.
So with Albert Battery and the other, as long as they get the funding.
So did we just say 6,000?
And I can put that in a condition in the funding letter.
Yes.
Yep. Gold Coast Theatre. Back to the bees.
Albert Battery.
Five.
Oh, what was the question about the bees? Oh,
You are droning on and stop it. The Queen Bee is speaking.
yeah. Was it members in the organisation? They haven't provided that information, but they're expecting that 5,000 people will benefit from the project.
No, we are making a decision. So I'm being mean and saying 1,500. You can all be as friendly as you want. Anybody seen the Bee movie?
I'll just make a comment on the Bee movie.
On the feedback from the panel members, I would suggest it's not the area of bees that we're actually most interested in preserving. So I would be happy with your estimate.
Right. Okay, 1,500. Sorry, yes, no? Excellent. Hearts of Purple. Do I have any other no's? I got a no and a question. I'll take the question before the no. Were you a no?
This before, I'm pretty sure I gave divisional funding. So I don't know if any other councillors did too.
I don't think they applied to me. Councillor Barlin-Lumsden.
Just checking, Chair, how many people do we say this would support?
There'd be the purchase of 10 watches worn by 10 women.
Okay, and that's with the full funding.
Yes, correct. And then there's an annual licence fee as well.
Yep.
So a contract fee, 4,500. No, so they've asked for $10,000 and the quote provided is for $11,027.50. The watches component, so the purchase of the 10 watches is $5,490, and the annual servicing fee and monitoring of those watches is $4,500.
I, for one, am supportive if we can save one life.
So I'm going to go to Councillor Young and then Councillor Patterson. Councillor Young.
So, and with that Hearts of Purple, I don't know if you all recall, I think it was Gailey that did the big run from one end of the Gold Coast to the other to raise money for these watches. And then they did a whole doco on the fact of how how much protection it's providing and how much more secure that these women who are removed from domestic violence situations, and that the confidence that they have wearing one of these watches, and how it helps them to reintegrate into society, and that especially when they've been in those the dreadful situations. So, and they did a whole big like presentation and everything on it, and I for one donated one outside of my council, donated the funds for one watch as well, because I just think anything that gives some sort of safety and security for people in these situations is well worth supporting.
Okay. Councillor Patterson.
I'd like to make a comment, but I'd need to make it in closed.
Okay, so I'm going to put that as a little asterisk on the side, because I think I'm going to probably adjourn the meeting shortly, just to give everybody a chance to powder their nose.
Okay, thank you.
Councillors, $1,500 for the name that Councillor Young...
Can't pronounce.
Giddy Up? Where do we land with Giddy Up?
Actually, we could, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to say 6.5. Pregnancy and family support, Councillor Hamill. Councillor Ryan. Councillor Taylor. You're all looking very nervous. Sorry, Nikki.
Sorry, through the chair.
Second last one, and you through the chair.
I'm really sorry. So when the applications were submitted, the new policy hadn't been adopted, and in the new policy, council took a policy position that gift vouchers were not supported as part of this program, and this application proposes the purchase of gift vouchers.
And
so
can I just clarify something? A decision of council beats a council policy, though, doesn't it?
Normally, except for the community grants policy, where council can't resolve in a way that's inconsistent with the community grants policy.
Joe, do you want to fix that?
Potentially, what we could do is, if council was minded to support the application, we could put some conditions on the funding, that it's not for the purchase of gift vouchers but for something else. They could give us a project proposal and we could approve it that way.
That sounds like a very positive way to have dealt with that, Nikki, and we thank you.
Champion. Well done.
The Gold Coast Barbershop, now, nobody likes the blenders more than I do. Nobody. And I think that I had suggested 4480 because it's the same dollar amount as the choir that we contributed to the Gold Coast Choir. So I was just trying to match my blenders. Councillor, is that... What's that? Councillors, I'm going to adjourn the meeting for 7 minutes and we'll be back at 3:35. Matt, can you... welcome back. We are rested and refreshed. We have a couple of outstanding items which have got an asterisk on them. So I'm just going to get the... Councillor Taylor, welcome.
Thank you. And I'm just going to jump back one. I know it's after the fact, but St John's do a great job, and I know we've been saving money here and there, and I think the extra $2,000 for the work they do with homeless in surface, I'd like to see if you'd consider that, or the councillors would consider it.
Nobody's not considering it. Everybody's considering it. Sold. 7,000, not 5,000, 7,000.
7,000.
Right. So councillors hear and say. Councillors, any objections to 5? Sold. I'm getting to the Bs. I'm going down the list alphabetically. I've got A. No, okay. Titans. Anybody?
Using those funds to build community in a different way than was proposed as well.
So I get a sense Titans aren't going to get up today, Councillor Gates, but I think it would be of interest maybe to the Mayor's office if you were to speak to the Titans as to whether or not there's anything the city could do in that space, and it might be that they might be able to rework that proposal.
I'm sure they have other community building initiatives that they do throughout, especially Northern Gold Coast. It's always been one of their pillars. So I would be interested in, if before full council, we could actually see whether they have a program that might be better suited for funding through this.
And I just got a thumbs up from Luke about that as well.
Okay.
Good idea.
Thank you. Good idea.
So that's a 0 here, but a bit of homework. Cancer patients, 7,500.
Here.
Sold, 7.5. Councillor McDonald, Bs.
I think that we should go now. I've tried to do all this up and I've lost it now. Sorry, go on to something else first.
Well, unfortunately, I think I'm at the Bs. So Bs are it. So we've done the As and we're now at the Bs. So I think we were at $1,500 and you're wanting to create some 10. What's that?
Yes.
I reckon we did.
Can't find the Bs now.
The Bs are about 8 from the bottom on Councillor Owen Jones' list.
All right, I think that we should be looking at about 5,000.
Is anybody at 5,000?
Could you remind me, are they able to work without the full amount?
They were looking to create a display, something or other, and touch 5,000 people with Bs.
I support your suggestion.
Councillor McDonald, I don't think that we've lifted past the 1,500.
Well, that's a shame because these are very important. Yeah, both.
Yep. Okay, so...
Okay, I'll go down to 3. 3. Thank you.
Do I hear 2.5, 2.5, 2.5? 3, sold, 3. Are you happy?
Well, I'm not happy, but 3's better than 1. Yeah.
What's that? Why'd you go to me for that? You are happy?
Yes.
Councillor McDonald is happy and we're going with 3. Right, councillors, we've got to the end of item 1, which is good. Are we all happy? Nikki? Nikki's happy, thank you. Yep. So I sense that there was more in favour of the 10,000 than against, so I wrote 10,000. So councillors, the amended recommendation will ultimately be Grant is going to create a new attachment 1, which reflects the discussions that we've had today. Nikki, I think it was maybe around the Titans doing some work between now and council. There is clearly still some unallocated funds out of all of that discussion. And likewise, my understanding is the city solicitor will be providing us some advice at some point in time regarding how we might be able to make a further distribution to the two surf life saving conferences. Yep. So firstly, are we all happy with that as being the change recommendation? Councillor Hamill? Okay, moved Councillor McDonald? Thank you. Seconded Councillor Hamill. From the far right to the far left. Well done. So Councillor McDonald, you don't need us to speak to that. Nobody wants to speak against any of those things. Councillor Patterson, can you remember all of the groups that we were supporting? Bees, Budgerigars, and Councillor McDonald, would it be okay if we ceded you closing to Councillor Gates, who would like something to say? Councillor Gates, you'd like to speak in favour?
I do. I do want to say thank you, Chairman, for the extra work that you've put into this. I want to also say thank you to the officers who I know put considerable effort into it and have a matrix that they work to make what they believe are the best recommendations to us. I just think that on occasions we have our ears very close to the ground, and we want to support as many community groups as possible. And I know there was like a 50% cut-off point that we'd like to overlook on occasions because of the perhaps level of inexperience of some of the applicants in making sure that their applications meet the expectation of our experienced officers. So I just want to say thank you to everyone involved, because I know that everyone who's going to be the recipient of some of these funds will be grateful for them, and it's a pleasure to be involved with the other councillors in having the opportunity to spread the dollars amongst our valuable volunteers and community members.
Thank you. Thank you, Nikki, and thank you, Katie. Councillors, with that, I'm going to ask for everybody to vote in favour, and we'll go from there. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Well done. Let's get on to item 2. What's that, sorry? Herman won't have the opportunity. Annual report 6.5. Councillors, I know that there are some minor amendments to the recommendation, and I welcome Sarah. So, Sarah, we've produced the draft annual report, and I'm open for you if you'd like to say a couple of words about your good work, and then I'll see if there are any questions from the councillors regarding that, noting that at some point in time it'll be printed and it'll be formalised and be the annual report for the year. For the time being, it remains in draft form.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yes, the annual report, as councillors may remember, a decision was taken this year to change the format of the annual report. So this year we're focusing very much on a Word document meeting all our legislative requirements, plus we will be producing a video and a newsletter, which with the aim of actually reaching all of our ratepayers across the city with those mediums. So this today is the annual report which meets all our legislative requirements. There are 2 amendments since the papers were issued, which are in front of you, and they relate to section 2.7.1, which is the table of administrative support and councillor advisors for councillors. Unfortunately, the headings and data were slightly misaligned, so that's been remedied in the amendment. And the second relates to senior executive remuneration, where there have been some adjustments in terms of focusing on positions and actual remuneration. So those are the only 2 amendments currently in front of you. Obviously, there may be more today, and any of those will be brought forward to council next week. Thank you.
Councillors, do we have any questions in regards to the annual report? Excellent. Councillor Patterson.
Sorry. Just one. I appreciate that this document is perhaps more for a legislative than a communication document. But I did, and maybe it's with others, but it's my understanding that the press are very interested in going directly to what councillors have and have not done. And I was just wondering whether it would be useful, perhaps not for this one, but to consider for future reports, to put the meeting attendance in a percentage, because the numbers don't actually reflect the actual percentages. If you're looking at a kid's attendance at your school, you do it in terms of a percentage. They'll tell you the percentage time, and schools are reported on percentage of attendance. If some committees have more meetings than others, it may appear like some councillors are not attending as many meetings as someone else, but it may just be that those committees had some committees cancelled. So I think a percentage would be useful.
Thank you. Yep. Through the chair, obviously we'll identify that as a potential improvement. If council wish to include that, then we can do so, either for this edition or for the next edition.
Councillor Gates.
Well, I would be interested in what the Act says on the meeting attendance and whether there is. Look, I think it's irrelevant. I don't think anyone really cares. Anyway, I mean, we all have a number of committees. Some of us have more. I know that when I'm acting mayor, I am able to vote at any committee, so perhaps I haven't been acting mayor in COVID times because the mayor hasn't gone anywhere. So this is probably fairly reflective of the number of committees that I'm on, but I would prefer it to stay the way it is.
Any other questions, councillors? Sarah, I just had a question in regards to page 96, which is the number of councillor conduct complaints, notices and referrals. My understanding is there's also a published register of those as well.
Yes.
And to me, it would make sense if there was a link to that published register, because I know that I'm responsible for a good portion of those in recent times, because I've had some people make misconduct allegations about me that have all been dismissed, but the number actually only reflects the raw number of complaints as opposed to the schedule, which actually then goes on to detail that they whilst it's been a misconduct, it's actually been dismissed. And I think that that's actually important. So rather than somebody looking at it and saying there's been 28 occasions where something's been referred, there's a schedule that actually explains that there's a whole lot of them that have just been dismissed. Councillor Gates.
If I could just contribute there, Chairman. Once they're dismissed, it's at the individual councillor's discretion whether in fact they are named as having been the person who was investigated. So I'm not sure that it in some cases would provide a great deal more information, because
at the very least, it would add a link to show people that the number that have been dismissed. So at the moment it says, I suppose it says there's 28. For example, there hasn't been 28 that have been have actually been gone through to the end of misconduct, because they've been dismissed. So, and that's the benefit of the hot link, of a link to it. I appreciate that it's at the councillor's discretion if it's been dismissed as to whether or not they're named or not, and and some are named and some aren't, and that's fine. But I think what's important to me is people being able to see that there's a link that explains that the number of 28 gets down to 1 or 2 or whatever it is pretty quick. Any other questions in regards to the annual report? Excellent. Would anybody like to move the recommendation? Moved Councillor Gates, seconded Councillor Patterson. All in favour? Carried. Thank you, Sarah. making a licence of local law swimming pools. Who saw this coming today? First there was budgerigars, now there's swimming pools. Would anybody like a quick tour of the local law? Does anybody have any questions regarding the local law? Quick tour. Yep. Welcome.
Are updates that reflect the chemical and microbiological criteria to align with Queensland Health Water Quality Guidelines for public aquatic facilities, and to amend the definition of swimming pools to licensable swimming pool and include broader terminology for flotation tanks. So it brings flotation tanks, some interactive water features like you might find in the city parks and splash parks. There's a couple of amendments. So as to water quality, amending that. Guide dogs, updating to reflect the Guide Hearing and Assistance Dog Act, and to clarify that certified dogs must not enter the licensable swimming pool, right? So they can come into the enclosure area, but not into the pool, and removing requirement to maintain daily records for water testing, and a bit of consequential rewording and numbering changes. How's that?
That's a quick tour, thank you. Councillor Gates.
Thank you. Can I just ask through you, Chairman, whether the expansion of the definition will result in the requirement to fence across the city, to fence these areas, for example, the Broadwater Parklands?
Okay, through your chair, fencing isn't covered under the local law.
Councillor Hamill.
I was happy to move it, Mr Chair.
Thank you. Seconded. Councillor Patterson.
Well, I'm not clear on that. Sorry, Chairman, I'm just confused about that. I mean, I'm quite sure that the fencing of pools sits under the planning directorate, but am I correct that the water play area at Broadwater Parklands is not fenced?
I think we're looking at you, Alison.
And I'm just concerned about the changing to the local law and the flow-on effects that may have on the budget, given what the local law will then say about them being defined as or redefined.
Okay. Through your chair, I might defer to our officer.
So through the chair, so the local law is focused on the water quality parameters. So the council operates a regulatory program where swimming pools are licensed, and they're licensed for the purpose of water quality monitoring and the display of resuscitation charts. So the local law is not focused on fencing requirements. That's all focused under the building code.
Okay.
So through the chair, so I think Councillor Gates, what they're trying to say is it's like it's a separate component. So this is just around us,
water quality.
Yeah, testing that water, that sort of thing. And I think, as you say, the fencing is covered under planning.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Hamill, you've moved it. Councillor Patterson,
Yep. With that. So now that Councillor Gates has raised that, just so I understand through you, Mr Chair. So this isn't changing the definition of a place like the rock pools to a swimming pool?
No, through your chair, no.
Okay.
Certainly not.
Yep, thanks.
Any other questions? Excellent. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. which leaves us to COVA. That is one of the gifts that I got at the last re-election. So this is a petition that I presented to council on behalf of some residents. It's a little bit complicated in the context that the body corporate had negotiated with the city, and there are impacted owners within the body corporate who weren't necessarily part of those negotiations, but have received some fairly hefty invoices, and that they had a petition. I suppose in the officer's report, so the petition called for a report which has been provided, and it called for a request for a reduction in the levies, and the officers have brought it forward and saying that any additional reductions to the rent and rates and charges debts owing could create an unwanted precedent, thereby exposing the council to further relief claims. So I'm interested in exploring that in particular. So I appreciate the idea of not wanting to set a precedent. Do you know whether or not there is another example in the city where the city has provided numerous years of backdated invoices to recover an outstanding amount? Because I suppose it's only a precedent that we should be worried about if we could imagine that there's going to be another set of circumstances like this.
In response, Mr. Chair, in my time in the role, I'm not aware of backdated invoices such that were issued to the body corporate in this instance.
Yeah. I actually, my personal view is that I don't think that it's unreasonable for the city to seek to provide a further reduction. I don't think that the owners impacted were seeking to have it all waived, but they were looking for it to be wound back to 2000 and 1st July 2018. And I think, which is, in my mind, isn't too dissimilar. There was an earlier period of, I think, prior to 6 years, which couldn't be recovered because it was outside of a date. So I think that I don't think it's unreasonable to come up with an adjustment that reflects the fact that we provided a whole lot of invoices all at once to owners that weren't expecting them. And in fact, I think that part of the challenge is that the developer in selling the product had told more than one of the owners, in fact all of them from what I understand, that they didn't have any more charges to pay. And the city didn't raise any invoices and then raised them all of a sudden. Councillor Gates.
How did it come to the city's attention that resulted in the very late issue of invoices?
Through Mr. Chair, I'm not sure I have a straight answer for that, councillor, other than there was a failure at the outset to simply advise revenue services that invoices needed to be raised.
Council's failure to do that?
Correct, to actually raise invoices, but I think it's spelled out pretty clearly in the report that there is no obligation under the lease to raise invoices, and that those invoices are to the body corporate and not to individual lot owners. And that's I think a pretty clear differentiation in terms of the people seeking relief are individual lot owners here, whereas our contract is with the body corporate.
But it's the individual lot owners who actually have to pay the body corporate that pays the council.
So the body corporate has issued the invoices to the members, but only and not at the time because they weren't aware of the charges?
Correct.
I think a further reduction is in order.
Yep. Sorry, back through you, Mr. Chair. The body corporate was well aware, because it was the body corporate who entered into the contract with the city. The body corporate had been providing information to the city from the outset, which there was a step up rental regime as owners built pontoons, that rental charges would apply. The body corporate had been providing that information to the city from day one. So the body corporate was fully aware of an obligation.
But the city wasn't raising the invoices until they raised them all at once. Yeah,
that is correct.
So to me, I think that it's a set
error.
of circumstances that won't necessarily. I think it's a set of circumstances that doesn't necessarily set a precedent, because I think the chances of us having these set of circumstances again are actually pretty slim.
I'd support 2018, Chairman.
Councillor Hamill?
I guess Councillor Gage just answered it. So does the chairman have a number in mind?
It'll be of no surprise to you that I'm happy to support the residents who have made the petition, but I do appreciate that it's a unique set of circumstances.
Yeah,
and I actually haven't come today with a changed recommendation because I wasn't too sure what the mood of the room may or may not be. Councillor Taylor?
Can I just get clarification? The agreement between the city was with the body corporate. Are we now looking at adjustment for the agreement with the body corporate, or individuals that have got the bill from the body corporate?
So it would be an adjustment to the body corporate, which would then be passed on to the individuals who have to pay it to the body corporate. Councillor Hamill?
So just to come back quickly, Mr Chair, so because I read page 304 and see what the current figure that's proposed to be has been invoiced. So based on the 2018 number, what would it be? Could I get that understanding? Reading through, I have to admit, I actually thought the conclusion summed it up pretty well, that the city had been pretty fair and reasonable in terms of not applying penalties and giving 4.5 years to pay it back and giving a 26% discount already. I'm not against increasing that a little bit, but to what number, and would the chairman see the same terms of no penalties and the same time period to pay it back?
Yes and yes. Yeah. My understanding is there is a schedule that I don't have with me, but there's a schedule showing the different owners, because some of the properties have changed hands and those amounts weren't chased. And some of the owners that have been there for the longer period are up for $12,000 or $14,000 from memory, something along those lines.
That was my next question, was like, what I'm guessing there's a different impact on different owners, which isn't necessarily fair.
So I don't have that information on me, but I'm happy if we were to work something up between now and council as to what that might look like. That 2018 still effectively required 3 years to be paid, with a couple more years not to be paid.
I'd be happy with that without actually knowing a figure, the difference there, because after reading through this, and I did have a couple reads of it because I thought it was a pretty interesting set of circumstances, how it came about. I had kind of felt the city was being pretty fair and reasonable on it. But if there's a separate figure that could come before full council to actually decide on what that number is and what it looks like.
Councillor Young and then Councillor McDonald.
And thank you, Chair. And just, I'm not sure who can answer this, but just what Councillor Hamill said then too about some or what yourself said about some having been sold at different times. So obviously we can't chase that. So surely I would look at it, not every single solicitor who's done his due diligence on the sale of a property would have missed this. So it's obviously something that's not been there. And I would tend to support what Councillor Owen-Jones is saying, because if a lot of those properties have been bought and sold and settled, and all of those legal people did their due diligence and no one picked it up, then there's been some discrepancy in whether it's with the body corporate, whether it's with the city, and I would tend to support looking further at some type of reduction there, because if all of our legal people haven't been able to pick that up in settlements or in the past, then obviously there's been a misjudgment or a misinformation or something left out. So I'd be tending to support a further reduction.
Councillor McDonald.
So these charges actually go to the body corp and not to the
they get passed through
landowners. Is there any way that for the future And look, and I tend to agree for that 2018. But maybe there's something that can be put on rates notices for the future, so that it's not missed again.
Yeah, and
I think that should be noted.
that it now is noted, but it's also now clearly. So what it hasn't happened prior to now is it hasn't appeared in the body corporate searches as such, whereas it now will because it's in correspondence. It's now in budgets. It previously wasn't.
But still, you get body corporates, they change membership.
Yep.
And I think, you know, if it's noted on the rates notice, there's no problem.
So, to councillors, maybe a procedural motion to defer a decision until council with the view of us having a schedule that shows what that dollar amount may mean if we go back to July, as in 2018, Councillor Gates?
And possibly could we get more information about properties that have changed hands that might...
I've seen a schedule previously where it showed some of that movement that had happened.
Because it's not fair to distribute amongst the remaining lot owners if it's picking up a shortfall from people that escaped.
Which it isn't. That was amended. That's really that top paragraph on page 304 where that was adjusted to reflect those amounts. But I think that a schedule showing what it might look like and what that change in ultimately revenue for the city might look like, but it's
and then maybe you can have a look at it as the representative and make a recommendation for us to consider.
And I suppose it's not necessarily we don't go out of our way to forgive things, but I think it's a relatively unique set of circumstances that I don't think will repeat itself, even though the Hope Island Canal continues to provide joy.
Only, Mr. Chairman, if you've got the chance to talk to the body corporate in the meantime, I'm just interested, have they been made aware of what the proposed, so no penalty in the 4.5 years?
Yes. Yep. So there's two things going on. One is the body corporate committee, I'm going to say, are not uncomfortable with the way that they were, the situation was managed with the city officers. The directly impacted body corporate owners who aren't represented on the body corporate committee aren't necessarily as happy with the outcome. So the petition was from the body corporate members that are impacted by the account. So there's really three stakeholders involved, being the city, the body corporate committee, and then some of the members who ultimately have to pick up the price. Ross?
So I was just going to say, just to clarify that, councillor, as far as I'm aware, unless the divisional councillors had conversations with the body corporate would not be aware of this.
Yeah, and it didn't come from the body corporate committee. It came from some of the lot owners who had, I'm going to say, attended my office, including at least one lot owner who was a solicitor who did searches and didn't find it, and she was upset about it. Councillor Taylor?
So I think that's continuing what I was asking before. So there would have to be a renegotiation with the body corporate who's unaware of it, and then it would be up to them to distribute again.
Yeah, so I think it would be very fair to say that if it resulted in a reduction of the amount that the body corporate had to pay to the city, the body corporate isn't going to be unhappy with entering into that negotiation.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the previous director had met with the body corporate and they were happy with the outcome, so we'd go through the process again.
Yeah, and so I accept that. To me, it's just it's a subset of the body corporate who has a different point of view because the other one's paying it. So the response to the petition submitted to council on behalf of the pontoon owners be deferred until the next council meeting to be held pending further information being provided. So I'm happy to move that. Seconded, Councillor Pauline Young. All in favour? Thank you. Councillors, is there any other meeting business that you would like to conduct? I reckon... 13 minutes past 4 and we're done. thank you for your attendance and your spirit